Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first of two project service sessions here at TechEd this year. Delighted that you could all take the time to come and spend some time with us and talk about BI and reporting using Project Server. By way of introduction, my name's Brad Purdy, and I'm the Solution Specialist for Enterprise Project Management at Microsoft Australia. Joining me today is Mark Soster. Mark is Director of IPMO, one of our valued partners. Mark's also an MVP for Project, one of only two in Australia, and also a valued part of our VTSP program. I'm going to hand over to Mark, and Mark's going to take you through this session. But before I do that, I've actually got a SharePoint voucher to give away to, I think it's SharePoint Saturday. So pay attention. We'll come back in at the end and ask you a question, and whoever answers that question can get the voucher. But I promised Mark I wouldn't take up too much time, so enjoy.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Soester. I have the pleasure of showing you the BI, the business intelligence component of Microsoft Project Server in SharePoint. Before I start, how many users are using MS Project Server right now? Okay, so there's actually a fair amount of people there. That's great. How many users are using SharePoint? A couple of more people, obviously. Now, going through the agenda, you will see that business intelligence essentially means an organization wants to be able to report against the information that is stored or centrally managed. That information is generally managed in databases, and the whole purpose of a business intelligence solution is to provide an organization with the right amount of information so that they can make objective calls. At the same time, a lot of BI solutions are always based on dashboards, and hence the reason why we decided to show you the dashboard capability and generally what it takes to create a dashboard with various different tools from Project Server and from SharePoint as such. So why dashboards is the big question, of course. I've seen lots of different organizations with dashboards, and dashboards are cool. They are very colorful. Just going to wait until everybody sits. They're cool, they're colorful, and of course they provide a certain amount of information. It's always a good selling point to provide a solution that gives you the business intelligence capability. But at the same time, dashboards are often implemented in a very rigorous way. And not often, or very often not really planned as such. So if you want to implement a dashboard, you may have to think about not just the technical solution, but also the ability to actually plan for that. Now, if you look at a general workflow of how we come about with dashboards, we need to make sure that we obviously acknowledge the need that we need that dashboard and the solution for such, and then we start to define our requirements and define the specification. Based on that specification, you then can, of course, design your dashboard or your business intelligence solution. And then you start developing the dashboard. Once you develop the dashboard, that's not it. Obviously, it is used on a very regular basis. So we need to make sure that we test the dashboard and the reports, that we train users on how to utilize that we support it, and that we redefine that. Now that sounds all fine and well, but today we are actually not here to discuss how we deploy dashboards from a conceptual point of view. We will very much concentrate on the technical component, on the developing of a dashboard within Project Server and SharePoint. Project Server is a service application for SharePoint as such. So it requires, Project Server require SharePoint Enterprise, SharePoint 2010 Enterprise. And the reason why it requires that is because SharePoint gives us a great capability of tools to report against information we store in solutions like Project Server. Project Server, an enterprise project management solution, generally allows organizations to manage their projects, their resources, timesheets, portfolios. So all of the delivery components that a large or medium organization needs to manage. Now in the past, a lot of, sorry, I'm just going to wait until everybody sits down. In the past, a lot of organizations manage projects actually on a, let's call it on a file by file basis. We have Excel spreadsheet, which is probably the biggest project management tool that's out there, and even though it isn't really a project management tool, a lot of project managers and users also utilize, of course, MS Project and Word. Main issue there is that it's trapped, that the information is trapped in a file. To automatically consolidate the information or to reduce the administrative overhead to produce program reports and consolidated reports, we generally recommend an enterprise, or that's why organizations implement an enterprise project management solution. It literally allows us to manage our projects in a very consistent way so that we know apples are apples and pears are pears. Now, it's great that we have the ability and the capability to maintain that data via user interfaces, but let's face it, if we wouldn't be able to easily access that kind of information, well, then we would actually feed a beast and wouldn't have a, let's call it a servant that helps us make decisions on a day-by-day basis. Well, and that's exactly what Project Server allows us to do, in conjunction, of course, with the tools of SharePoint. So when I look at the tools that actually SharePoint delivers, and it's a combination of SharePoint and SQL Server, we have things like Excel services, Performance Point services, Visio services, SQL Server reporting services, online views. So we have a whole range of different tools that we can use. And they come out of the box with SharePoint Enterprise, and that is actually one of the compelling reasons to utilize that combination. On the other hand, Project Server as such doesn't give you really a reporting capability. There is no tool that allows you to develop, bless you, that allows you to develop a report or an OLAP cube. What Project Server does very well is it gives you a data source. It automatically consolidates the information for you. And if you've ever done a business intelligence project, then you know that the crunch and the hard part is actually getting the data together. Well, Project Server really does that for you, and that is the very compelling reason of utilizing a tool like Project Server. Now, I'm going to show you the fun bit today. I'm going to show you how to utilize these tools and how to create some really nice looking dashboards so that your executives or that your key stakeholders have the ability to make these objective decisions. However, in order for us to understand how we create these type of reports, we need to also understand the data sources as such. So Project Server gives you a reporting database, and the reporting database is based on a SQL Server environment. That reporting database gives you the ability to very simply and easily create reports. At the same time, we have an analytical or an OLAP database that out of the box allows you to slice and dice and use the pivot table capability of Excel and other tools to actually get information that you are after. So how does the information actually come into these reporting databases? Well, this is where the Project Server data flow comes through. I thought obviously it's a very high level chart, but I thought I'll let you know how this is actually working. So in Project Server, users have user interfaces, very often the internet browser, and we use things like MS Project, Project Professional, or Project Web App, or we use SharePoint or any other tool to maintain data on a regular basis. That data is then pushed into databases. Now, Project Server currently has actually 4 different databases, whereby only one of the databases is interesting for us from a reporting point of view. Once you publish the information into the Project Server environment, it will then automatically move the information into the relational database. And based on that relational database, Project Server is then also able to build these OLAP cubes. So what kind of data is actually maintained in these databases? Let's have a look. So Project Server's relational database allows us to produce generally printable reports, and very importantly, real-time reports. So if you are after data that needs to be updated and maintained and visible real-time, the relational data source is the right data source for you. In Project Server, it uses project schedule data, resource data, portfolio data, risks, issues, demand management, which allows you to literally go from a project proposal all the way through to benefit realization of a closed project. On the other hand, we have, of course, the analytical database, or OLAP cubes, as we like to call them. So Project Server gives you 14 of these OLAP cubes out of the box. And they're not just 14, they're actually potentially 14 per different department. So if you work for a large organization that has different departments, and these departments need to have departmental specific reporting, Project Server actually takes care from a data source point of view. So these are the two data sources that we need to fully understand in order to actually create our reports and our dashboards. Once we understand the data sources, well, then we have a whole bunch of different tools, and we already mentioned some of them. I thought I'll outline all of the tools that SharePoint and SQL Server in that instance, which of course needs to be part of a Project Server solution, has to offer. Now, unfortunately, I have actually quite a lot of content, and I can't go through every single one of these tools, but I will show you some of those tools. In particular, Excel services, performance point services, and reporting services. Apart from the sources, from the data sources, Project Server has a so-called business intelligence out of the box. And that business intelligence utilizes SharePoint functionality and already predefined so-called ODC files, Office Data Connection files. That means a user doesn't have to be a developer in order to access the data. All they need to do is they need to select a link, and that link will then automatically open up tools like Excel, for example, where information can be created and maintained. At the same time, Project Server already has predefined templates and sample reports. Now, these predefined templates meant to be a start. It gives you the main data that most organizations need, and you can then refine that template to create the report of your choice. So I thought I'll show you a little business intelligence, or the look and feel of the business intelligence component of Project Server. In order for me to do that, I'm going to navigate into my wonderful image here, and what you see here right now is Project Web App. Project Web App is the user interface, is the web user interface for Project Server. For those of you who have not worked with Microsoft Project Server, we have actually two separate user interfaces. We have MS Project or MS Project Professional, which manages our schedule, and that's a desktop application, predominantly for project managers or for schedulers as such. But a vast majority of the users, and there would be team members, team leads, resource managers, timesheet managers, they exclusively utilize Project Web App. So it literally means that a user can just simply type in a URL on the browser and has the information at hand. So what you see here is the classical out-of-the-box home page of Project Web App. You can see reminders and timesheets and all of these wonderful things that you can maintain in Project Server. On the left-hand side, you can see these. You can see the links, and you will also be able to navigate to the business intelligence component. And this business intelligence component allows you to view and create reports. Now, as I mentioned earlier, out of the box we have sample reports, and these sample reports are very easily accessible. You just literally have to select the link and then choose the project report or the reports that you would like to have. Things like a simple project list. So there's simple project list, which is based, by the way, on Excel services. We'll do that in a second. Literally utilizes an Office Data Connection and real-time gets the information and then displays that particular report. Now, to be honest, I don't find them hugely attractive, and dashboards as such need to be good-looking, I believe, and reports need to be informative. They shouldn't be too cluttered, and they shouldn't be overwhelmed with information. However, this is only a template, and this template, of course, can be amended as such. What that means is you can ultimately create dashboards, well, that look a little bit like that. So if you want to look at, let's say, the financial performance of a particular project or of a group of projects, you literally have the ability to have global filters. You can select the projects that you would like to see, and by literally going onto the browser and slicing and dicing and filtering the information, you always have the latest data. Now, this can be moved, of course, in many different ways, and different technologies can be used. So when I look at things like, well, a bubble chart, which executives love, for one reason or another, it is very compelling to have these things on the net, of course. And depending on what you want to do with the information, you then literally have also the ability to export that into an Excel or PDF or Word document. So as long as you have the information available, as long as you maintain the data in a very high qualitative information set, you will always be able to create these type of reports and dashboards. Now, I'll just show you a couple of other ones of those. Obviously, you can have eyes and you can have any kind of graphs that you would like to have, and you have the ability to drill down into certain sets of information that is fully provided by Project Server. So I thought for us it is important that we actually know how to use one of those. Now what I thought is I created just a TechEd dashboard that we will literally go through for the rest of the session. So we will develop that from scratch. I thought dashboards need to be logically defined, and you need to make sure that you see project costs that is in one area, that you have resource-related information in another area. So don't take lots of different sets of information and bundle them up in one screen. Make sure that that one screen actually is meaningful, so that you can actually have things like, well, resource workload. I'm sure we all work for organizations where we have more work than resources. The big issue right now is, well, I go to my boss and I say, I have so much work, I need more resources. And my boss says to me, show it to me. Can you do that today? That's one of the biggest issues. Work that we need to do needs to be captured. Otherwise, we will always be overworked, and we will always work 12 hours and 7 days a week. So what Project Server allows us to do is literally associate that work that we need to do to resources, and hence I have the ability to outline what kind of workload we have. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to look at the resource workload, and at the same time it gives me a trend analysis for a particular year where the work for project actually occurs. So I can see overall, well, this particular organization in 2011 is actually pretty busy from the first day of the year to last day. And the reason why that is because we have so many different reports, so many different projects where we have work allocated to. Well, and then of course we want to also be able to create status reports or dashboard, or let's call them status reports that are printable. Now, in order for us to do that, we need to be able to utilize again the right technology. And I must apologize for the screen resolution. I need to scroll a little bit. But this particular report literally allows me to have a very quick overview per department, what my projects are, the percentage completed, the general health, their associated dollar values, and also their associated dates. That's generally the type of information that executive program managers are interested in. The nice thing about that is if your executive manager does not necessarily want to do that, want to drill into an online report, he would like to have a printable report, well, you can very easily just export that data, and it will open up a tool of your choice, whether it's PDF or Word, and you now have an offline version of this particular report that you can then just simply print out. So the purpose of dashboards are always a little bit different, and we need to therefore very clearly analyze what's the purpose of the information that I provide to my people. So that's a quick excursion through the business intelligence component and the out-of-the-box capability where you have already templates and sample reports. Okay, so we will build our dashboard from scratch. What we will do is by utilizing the Project Server data sources, we will actually develop some Excel services reports, we will develop some reporting services reports, performance services reports, and at the end, we will create a dashboard by puzzling the information all together. And we will actually use performance point services to do exactly that. At the end, we need to, of course, publish that to the right audience, and security is very important, so I'll also show you how you can actually apply security to these dashboards too. Excel services. Who works with Excel services? Okay, a couple. I think Excel, and I think we all agree, Excel is probably the most widely used reporting tool that's out there. The nice thing is it allows us to be very flexible in the information that we collect, but that's also its downfall, because a user can just simply insert a new column and has new sets of data, and now if we have one Excel spreadsheet with a new column and another Excel spreadsheet with not that new column, we can't easily consolidate that. Well, ideally, we would want to be able to create a report and then publish that report. And that's exactly what Excel Services allows us to do. It allows us to, it allows a business user to create a report, publish that report, and every user that requires the information just simply browses to that data. So how does it work? Well, there's my user, and that user has his Excel and an Excel workbook. He opens up that file, and what happens is that file, the first thing it does is it looks at the Office data connection to retrieve the information of the data sources. But we are using Excel Services. Excel Services says, well, dear user, do you actually have the right to get the information out of the data source? And if you get the information out of the data source, it will literally then retrieve the data via Excel Services, and then either via Excel Services or via Excel will outline this particular report. And that's how easy it is. It literally means that a business user can create its own reports. As an IT member, as an IT staff member, I don't need to do these reports from a technical point of view because I don't understand what, what the content is anyway. Ideally, you want to give a user that capability. I'm going to spend a fair amount of time in Excel and Excel Services because I believe from a business point of view that is one of the most valuable tools that you can get. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I navigate back into Project Web App, and through Project Web App I'm going to navigate to my data connections. I already mentioned that out of the box Project Server provides you with the so-called ODC files, and these data connection files literally already access the cubes or access the relational databases that you need in order to get the data. Now, fair enough, that is pretty technical, or it looks pretty technical here, but to be honest, this can be renamed. You can, out of the box, you can actually see that the user has a description and knows exactly what type of, in that instance, OLAP cube they would like to select. So what I'll do is, I want to be able to use my OLAP cube to create a cost report. In order for me to do that, I'm going to go into my OLAP Portfolio Analyzer, which is one of these many cubes that I mentioned earlier, and by accessing that information, I literally now open, or the system opens up Excel as such. I enable the data connection, and now I have the pivot table functionality of Excel. Who uses pivot tables? Good. For those of you who don't use pivot tables, use pivot tables. It's very good. It allows a user literally to see the performance of an organization and make objective decisions. A lot of decisions are made on gut feeling. Well, the more information we have available, the better our decision will be. So what I'm going to do is I want to be able to compare my forecast cost, and as you can see on the right-hand side, we have so-called measurements. These are the values that are stored in our database, in our OLAP database. And I can say I would like to check the cost, and I would like to compare that to my baseline cost. Now, that value as such doesn't make a lot of sense, so I want to be able to filter that data. So what I do next is, instead of measurements, I'm going to start using dimensions, and dimensions can be compared to, well, to the frame of a report, really. It gives me, a dimension allows me literally to filter, slice and dice the data. And what exactly does that mean? Well, I'll show you. What I'll do is first thing is I want to be able to analyze my time, and this particular time should be a report filter. By simply dragging and dropping the report filter of the time into my report, I now have literally the ability to filter by year, by quarter, by month, by week, by day, and if you really require minutes, you are a control freak. So we need to make sure that we get that data, and Project Server, thank goodness, does that on a daily basis. So at the same time, I would like to also, and that's one of these things that a user has to get used to, they need to understand all of these dimensions. But when you use Project Server, these dimensions will actually become very, very logical because, well, project name means project name, and that's the way it is. And a project list means that it's the name of all of the list of the project that I manage in Project Server. So in that instance, I actually don't want to be able to look at my project list. I would like to have a breakdown by project department because remember, we create a dashboard, and a dashboard shouldn't have lots and lots of information. It should give me a helicopter view of how much cost in comparison to my baseline cost do I actually have. Now, by utilizing just simply Excel functionality, you literally have the ability to very quickly manipulate the data. Sorry, I'm just going to make a T because pretty counts. And I have literally now created a report in less than 30 seconds by saying, okay, what is the cost in comparison to my baseline cost, let's say for not all time, but for 2011. Now, a dashboard generally should have a graph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize Excel's functionality as a business user, and I'm going to use my pivot charts or my charting in a Project Server. And I'm going to use a column, and as you can see, it automatically recognizes, of course, the values in here. And as part of these values, I can now very clearly see, okay, in comparison to my original baseline, which in that instance is my red line, in comparison to my forecast cost, well, IT is overspent big times. Does that sound familiar? So in order to make that even look a bit nicer, you can of course use the Excel functionality to make that a little bit more appealing. And for those of you who have Excel 2007 or 2010, I'm sure you are all familiar with these wonderful colors that you can use. And if you like design, then you can actually create these reports in a very nice fashion. That's all fine and well, but as part of my dashboard, I need to make sure that people don't just simply go into that Excel spreadsheet. So what I'll do is, the first thing I'm going to do is I actually name my chart, and I'm going to call this forecast, versus, baseline. And now I have the ability with Excel 2007 or 2010 to save and send my new created report to SharePoint. Ideally, I would like to save that into a predefined document library that I manage in SharePoint. In our instance, it's actually the business intelligence link that Project Server provides. Doesn't trust me? That's good. I just wanted to check. Thank you. Are you still looking? All right, there we go. So and now what I'll do is I literally navigate to my Project BI Center, and I created, or Project Server actually created, a document library that they're called sample reports. I'm just going to store that in the sample reports, and I'm going to call this here my tech at Preso 2. And at the same time, I'm going to tell SharePoint and Excel services, I would like to either publish my entire workbook. Alternatively, I would like to only publish a particular sheet. Well, I only have one sheet. Or alternatively, I say, no, I would only like to publish a particular item. And literally, I now, because I named my chart, I now say forecast versus baseline chart is the one that I would like to publish. And by saving the information, and in that instance, the document library asks me for my content type, it saves it and automatically opens up Excel services for you to check. As you can see, this Excel spreadsheet that I created earlier, we literally now have that graph available for our dashboard. So this is one puzzle piece that we have for our entire dashboard. That's the beauty about Excel services. Now, because I want to utilize that puzzle piece, and at the end of the session, I would like to take all of these puzzle pieces and want to create that dashboard and want to have a global filter, I need to make sure that Excel understands that when I have a global filter called time, that I can actually use that global filter and the data will change accordingly. So what I do is I go into my filter and I just name that. In that instance, I'm just going to name it time. Once I named that particular cell, I can now go back into my report and go back into my Excel options. And as you can see, now also have a named range called time. And what I do is I'm going to say, well, I would like to have that named range as a parameter because the filter that I'm going to create will actually be created in performance point. So what I do is I add this particular parameter to my Excel spreadsheet and I publish that. And that is literally how you can develop these type of reports. Now, I have created one a little bit earlier, simply because we don't have that much time. So what I'll do is I'm just going to open that up. I'll go into my demo image. I go into my sample reports, and I'm going to open up my dashboard reports for the TechEd. Before I do that, so that there's no confusion, I'm going to close that Excel spreadsheet. So once I have this open, as you can see, this is essentially, thank you, this is essentially the report that I created earlier. Now I created another one, which is a so-called resource trend report. Again, I utilized the OLAP cube, the pivot table capability, and I dragged my years, and I dragged my resources out and utilized the graph that Excel offers me, and I published that particular graph. And another one is the project trend report, and again, all I did is I utilized the pivot table capability by, in that instance, by having a weekly breakdown of all of the work that is allocated per project. Sorry, I'm just going to go like that. So literally, for 2011, this particular project has these amount of hours per week allocated on work, and that's how I can create these type of graphs here. Now in that instance, I utilize just again the straight out of the box functionality of Excel, and these are the so-called spark lines, and you just simply have to select that column, and it runs these spark lines next to you, and that's really it. So in order for you to know how to create these reports, it is important that you understand what kind of data you would like to present. In our instance, we presented that. So that's the demo for Excel services, and we will go back to Excel services or to the reports that we created later down the track. Now, the next tool I'd like to introduce is the reporting services tool, or report builder to be more precise. Reporting services is actually not a SharePoint tool, it's a SQL Server tool. And it allows you to create printable reports online and allows you to export those. Now you can actually create these reports in different ways. And to be quite honest, unlike Excel services, the audience for these reports, or the report generator, the audience for the report generations are probably not necessarily business users all of the time. They are probably more technically versatile users. They don't have to be a developer, and look, by all stretch of imagination, I'm not a developer and I can create these reports, but a user needs to understand the database and needs to understand the data set. Now, reporting services allows us to create two separate tools, the reports. One is called the Visual Studio 2008 or 2010, and the other one is called Report Builder. Report Builder can essentially do exactly the same thing than Visual Studio, and I'm sure some of the developers would disagree with that. But I do know that as of SQL Server 2008, this Report Builder is actually outstandingly good. So why would I use the report builder? The report builder allows me to create these reports without necessarily needing to be a developer, needing to have all of these development tools. In fact, the report builder comes out of the box with SQL Server. And a user can just simply select the link and that report will then come up. That report builder will automatically download on the desktop and will and the user can then use that particular report. So let's have a look how reporting services or report builder works. So I'm going to go back into my business intelligence tool. Well, actually this time I'm going to go into my reporting services reports document library, and within that reporting services reports document library, we decided to integrate reporting services into SharePoint. You can do that. It's actually quite simple. And by saying I would like to create or develop a new report, I can literally say open up report builder. And what happens is it launches the application, and if you have downloaded that little application on your desktop already, it will just simply open up. If you haven't downloaded that, by the way, it will ask you whether you would like to download it. It's a couple of megs big and downloads it onto your desktop. Well, and this is the user interface of the report builder as such. So what that allows me to do is it allows me to define a data source. Now, in our instance, this data source will be the project server reporting database data source. The reason why I decided to use the SQL Server database is because I would like to have real-time data. And at the same time, I would like to print that particular report. So what I do is I'm going to give that a name, my data source, which in my instance, I'm going to use the embedded connection, and I'll say project server reporting DB. And by utilizing the functionality, I know that my database name is called Demo 2010A. This is my server name where my SQL Server data is stored, and because I have access to it, I now literally have access to all of the databases that are in that particular database. Now, we wouldn't want to give report users access to all of these databases, by the way. What we would want to do is we would want to give them access to the project web app reporting database. So what I've done is I'll just test the connection, and the connection was created successfully. And I say, okay. So first of all, data connection is most important because the data connection will then also determine the sets of data that I would like to retrieve from this particular database. And that's where data sets come into place. By selecting the data sets and right-clicking the data set, I can literally add a new data set. Now, what I'll say is, again, I'm going to embed this particular data set, and I say, please utilize the data source that I created earlier, and now I would like you to retrieve the data that I need. And by going into the query designer, what literally happens is a little user interface comes up, and it already shows me all of the tables that are in the reporting database. Well, and in our instance, also all of the views that are in that database. In that instance, I'm going to use my EPM project user view. These views are predefined to make reporting life easier. So if you have a little bit of a technical nick for reporting and databases, you will find it very easy to navigate through the reporting database and through the views. So in that instance, I'm just going to use my project name, my project start and finish date, and ideally I would like to have my percentage completed, which are, what, did I miss it? Oh, sorry, I'll get it in a second. Because everybody wants to know the percentage completed of a project. So what I've done is I said, go to this database and retrieve the data, the project name, the start, finish, and the percentage completed. And now I have the list of these data sets available. I may give that a name and call that project info. Now that I have all of the data in the data sets, I can literally start creating this report. And by creating the report, you can literally say, I would like to create a table, or I would like to create a list, or I would like to create a matrix. In my instance, I'm just simply going to use a table. Now, Report Builder, because it's not actually pure development tool, gives you wizards, and these wizards are actually quite helpful for people that are not necessarily developers. I'm going to just simply insert the table and drag the information in here. Now in that instance, what I'll do is I'll say, I would like to see my project name, and I would like to see my project start date. And if I would run this report now, you will already see that I have a list of all of my projects and all of the start dates. So it's very easy to create. Obviously, we need to make sure that we make these reports a bit better looking. And again, the report builder allows you to do that. By going into certain properties, you can, again, just very similar like Excel, can say, well, this one here is actually a date, and I only want to see the date and not time. Visualization, as I already said, is very important, and for this particular report I thought, well, we're going to show percentage completed based on a gouge. By selecting that, I can now go into the table, and a little dialog window opens up, and you have a whole set of different visualizations that you can run in that report. So what I'll do is I'm just going to lose the linear horizontal gouge, and now I literally have a gouge in my report. All I need to do now is drop that percentage completed that I've chosen here earlier into the graph. And as you can see, I'm just going to say this is bold, and this is bold, and this is percentage completed. You can very quickly create that type of report. Now, unfortunately, because of the lack of time, I'm not able to do all of the entire report. So obviously, I created one earlier, and this one looks very similar to. Where is it? Looks very similar. I actually have to open it to the one that I've shown you earlier, which is the projects by department. I added that in Report Builder. It opens it up. And as you can see, the report, this is the standard or the dashboard report that we had earlier, where I have the ability to group the information by department, by project name, percentage completed. I have some health figures here, and I also have my project costs and my project date incorporated here. So if I run this report, I have the ability to choose a particular department, and as you can see, this report is now created. This is exactly the report that we will also incorporate in our dashboard a little bit later. That's the reporting services component. Now, as the last tool that I would like to introduce is the performance point services, or performance point services in SharePoint, I must say. This is new in SharePoint 2010, and it literally allows you to create these dashboards, and it allows you to interactively drill down from a dashboard into more details. Now, performance point services not just allows you to create graphical reports, it also is the puzzles, it also brings the puzzle pieces together into one dashboard. Now, we do that with a tool. And the audience for that, again, obviously the business user. Report developers don't necessarily need, or you don't necessarily need to have development skills. A business user can most certainly do that, but again, you probably need to have a bit of a knack for technology as such. The dashboard designer is our client tool that we're going to utilize, and again, just like the report builder, it is part of SharePoint. That means if you create the first time a performance point report, it will automatically download that client tool onto your desktop, and you can then utilize that desktop straight away. So the dashboard designer has a very rich user interface, and it is based on performance point. It means the client communicates to the performance point services. It allows me to create data connections, and it allows me to create content. And as I said, at the end, it brings all of the different reports together into a dashboard. Okay, let's have a look how that looks like. So again, I'm going to go into my image. I'm going to close what I've got here right now. And by navigating back into my business intelligence component, you now have in the Business Intelligence Center the ability to create these types of reports. And in my instance, I would like to use the Performance Point Services report. And it tells you already what Performance Point Services does, and it also allows me to run my dashboard designer directly from here. So by opening the button or by selecting the button, it will open up the Performance Point Designer. Now, this Performance Point Designer allows me now to create data connections. Just like we did in Excel via ODC files, we now also have the ability to create data connections directly to our reporting database or to our OLAP database. I go into my Create button and I say, I would like to create a new data source. And again, the rich user interface literally allows us to drag and click ourselves through. Analysis services, and I say, okay, and what we need to do next is we need to say, okay, what's the server name, just like we did that also earlier in the reporting database, and it's demo 2010A. And what kind of database would you like to use? Well, I would like to use my project server demo database, which is the out-of-the-box project server OLAP Cube database. And now I have the ability to determine what kind of OLAP Cube would I like to connect to. In that instance, it's the portfolio analyzer as such. I'll give that new data connection a name, and I say TechEd project server portfolio analyzer. Now, because this particular OLAP Cube also has time dimensions, you actually have the ability to associate time dimensions to that data connection. You can say, well, the time dimension in that OLAP Cube should be reflected by different aggregations. Now, you can say a dashboard shouldn't display data on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. It should only display data on a monthly basis, and this is exactly what you can do. So you can map the different time aggregations into that particular part. Now, in my instance, I'm just going to do month, and in that instance also week, day for a bit later. So I now have created a data connection. Again, the data connection is vital, otherwise you will not be able to create your content. Well, and this is where the Performance Point content comes into place. Performance Point content is created via the designer, and once you publish that content on the web, it becomes available via dashboard. Now, in my instance, I would like to create an analytical chart. And this analytical chart allows me to connect to my data source. And on the right-hand side, again, I have all of my measures that I had earlier, and I have all of my dimensions as well. Now, again, my measures, in that instance, I would only want to know the cost, so I'm going to move my cost into my data source, into my report. And then I would like to also know my department, my project department, and I move that into the different series. And lastly, I would like to have my time dimension. And as you can see, it starts to create a report now. In that instance, I would like to not see all of the time. I'm just interested in a particular part. Let's say I'm interested in monthly reports, so I can literally say, hey, by default, I would like you to display the 12th month of 2010. And we say, okay. And it now literally has created exactly that. And in that instance, I also don't want to have all of my departments or a consolidated view. I would like to have them separately. And separately, they don't look so nice. So I'm going to change my type, and I'm going to say I would like to have a stack bar. And as you can see, it now gives me a very easy and quick way to, again, visualize the total cost. And very quickly can I, oh, sorry, I've got all time in here. That's not what I want. Sorry, what's here? And very quickly, again, can I see what's the total spend per department? In that instance, as you can see, again, IT is probably the biggest cost factor in our organization. Now, I have to give this particular report a name, and I'm going to call this here again TechEd dashboard, cost dashboard. All right. And I have now literally created a new puzzle piece. And that new puzzle piece, when I look at the big picture of my report, of my dashboard, is actually only this tiny little part here. Now, we need to, because we want to bring all of these puzzle pieces together, we need to tell the Performance Point services that we also want to have my Excel services reports that I created earlier, and also my reporting services reports. And again, this is nothing else but content, and we need to create a frame for this particular content. So in my instance, I'm going to go to my other reports, and I have the ability now via Excel services to navigate to the document library where I saved my Excel spreadsheet earlier, to my TechEd Preso 2, and I can even determine what kind of item I would like to have. In that instance, it's the forecast versus baseline item. Look at that, and at the same time, it already recognized that this Excel spreadsheet had a so-called parameter, and this parameter we will use later to actually bring the filters together. If I view that now, you see this is exactly that Excel spreadsheet that we've created earlier. So now I created my second puzzle piece in Performance Point in the Dashboard Designer. I'll give that my name, and that is forecast. Sorry, I'm going to do TE. Forecast versus baseline cost. Give that to a description. And again, I have now created the second puzzle of my dashboard. Well, and this is literally what I need to do for all of the different puzzle pieces that I want to bring together. I'll go back to the Performance Point, to the Dashboard Designer in a second. But what we've essentially done here right now is we literally have created the puzzle pieces. The puzzle pieces of Excel services, of reporting services, and of Performance Point services. In order for us to bring that together, again, the Dashboard Designer allows us to do that. And that literally means these puzzle pieces need to move into a web page with a global filter capability so that we have our, overall dashboard. So how does that work? Well, again, I'm going to go into my Dashboard Designer, and this time I already created these TechEd cost graphs that I've shown you earlier, and I just want to show you those. So that was the graph that I created earlier, and this was the forecast versus baseline, exactly the same part. And here is my trend report from my Excel spreadsheet. So I literally only created these placeholders and put them all together. And now I need to make sure that I actually create the dashboard itself. Now within the dashboard, sorry, I'm going to go one step back. Before I can do that, I also need to create a filter. We mentioned earlier that we want to have the ability to globally filter the data in my dashboard so that I actually have the ability to say, hey, I would like to see my 2009 and my 2010 data. And of course, my dashboard should move accordingly, and they should display that data accordingly. So in order for me to do that, again, it's actually very simple. We go into our Create, and we go into our Filter button. We go into our Member selection. And it asks me again for a data connection. This is the data connection that I created earlier. And I now need to choose a particular data connection in a particular dimension. Now I want to create a filter based on the years, so a time filter. I'm going to use my dimension time, and I could already predefine the data that I would like to outline. So if you're not interested in 1984, which I hope you don't, you have the ability now to say, well, I'm interested in 2010, 11, 12, 13, and maybe 14. So you can already predefine that. Now, obviously, this can be very much extended. That requires some development skills. In that instance, I really want to make sure that business users with a technical knack have the ability to do that themselves. Because let's face it, 90% of the dashboards and the reports that we need are not that hugely complicated. As long as you have the data source available, a business user should be able to do that themselves. Now, I want to have a multi-select so that I can say I would like to see 2008 and 2010. Again, you have different options here. And this one I'm going to call time. So once I have created the filter and all of the components, I can now finally create my dashboard. The dashboard designer itself gives you already some predefined templates that you can use. Now, they're not always most appropriate. You can, of course, change the width and the heights, and you can also create new templates for the SharePoint for the dashboard designer. In my instance, I'm quite happy with that with the header and 2 columns. And what I've got now is literally a web page with a drag and drop capability where I can say I would like to have my time filter on my header, and I would like to have my forecast cost on the left-hand column. And I would like to have my forecast baseline Excel spreadsheet on the right-hand side. Now, all I now need to do is I need to connect it all up. How do I connect it? Well, by simply utilizing the create connection, and I can now say send the filter values to my forecast cost graph and outline that based on my time value and my source value. In that instance, I'm going to use my unique name. I say OK, and I do the same with the right-hand side, which is my forecast versus baseline chart, my time, and again, my member value. Now I created the first page of my dashboard. Now, let's see whether this is actually working. And before I do that, I'll actually give this one here a name, and this is project cost. And the dashboard itself is TE dashboard. When I right-click that dashboard, I literally have the ability to deploy that to SharePoint. And what happens next is I need to determine where would I like to save this particular web page. Now, we have our Business Intelligence Center, and because the Business Intelligence Center is the out-of-the-box BI component that Project Server delivers, I would like to save that under the dashboards. I'm going to say OK. And as you can see, it has now literally created that first report. Couple of things when it comes to these report generations, and yeah, look, they may not look so nice for 2010. I'm going to do 2011 and 12. And as you can see, that global filter now automatically changes the values between these 2 graphs. So literally within now an hour, we have outlined the content of the data sources, of the different tools, and now we can puzzle it together. But a dashboard is not just one page. You may want to create more of those. And that's what you can do with the dashboard designer. So you can say, great, I have my first dashboard, but I would like to have a new page. And this new page, this time I would like to have a different layout. I just want to have 2 columns, because for this particular one, this trend analysis, I don't necessarily need to have a filter. again, I outline that, and I'm going to call that my resource trend analysis, well, just resource trend. When I go back into my content, I can now literally say, this is my project trend, which I'm going to move over here. And I don't have my resource trend here just yet. I'm just going to use that. And my TechCAD resource trend, which is this one here. That was that view. I'm going to bring that over here. And again, I want to view the data and the information. I right-click, I deploy, and no navigation. It took me ages to discover that. But there is actually, under the properties, a tiny little tick on that says include page list for navigation. Don't forget that. If you now deploy the solution, again, it will give me that view, and of course, it will give me my resource trend analysis. And that's really the magic of dashboarding, utilizing project server source code and utilizing SharePoint's tool set. What that means ultimately, you can literally go nuts with the dashboards, but don't just create these because they are nice pictures. If you outline these dashboards and decisions are made from an organizational point of view, guys, that can have big, big impacts. You need to make sure that your data is clean. And that is actually the hard part of dashboarding. Creating these wonderful looking reports is actually not that hard, as you can see. Even a non-developer can do that easily. Make sure that the data is accurate. That's very, very important. And then you literally have the ability to create one. Well, because we have actually 2 minutes more, I'm actually also going to create that project status report. There is a little trick by that one. So again, I go back into my dashboard. I'm going to create another one. This time, I use 2 rows, and I want to show you how you can actually change the height of that. So this is my report. This is my project status. And what I do here is, again, this time, I actually need a filter, which is my department filter. And I believe I have a department filter created earlier. There we go. Yep. And I can now, in my dashboard, I can now incorporate this department filter. But because that reporting services report is so much wider and so much bigger, I don't want to have all of the space. So if you right-click on the designer, you actually can have a zone setting. And this zone setting allows you to specify the percentage or the pixels that you need to have. Now, because it's only a filter, I don't need 50% of the screen for the filter. I only need 10%. And what I've done is I created a filter here. And last but not least, I'm going to also utilize that status report that we created earlier. Oh, what is it called again? Sorry, I have to peek. Yeah, that's right. Project dashboard. That makes sense. Project dashboard. So this project dashboard, by the way, is nothing else but a link to the reporting services report that we created earlier. Again, you can do that via this reporting services part. If I now go into my dashboard, I can use this project dashboard, put it in here, and again, deploy that. And now I have 3. 1, 2, and so reporting services report, depending on the amount of data, it may take a second or 10. Maybe 15, okay, fair enough. And it now creates that report. And as you can see, again, utilizing the right tools and the right tools for the right reasons. I want to be able to literally export that. Great, then use a reporting services report. And that is really it, how you create a project dashboard. Now, last but not least, by puzzling that together, there's one more item that I would like to show you, and that is security. Dashboards are very often need to be secured. Now, SharePoint as such gives me a very quick and easy capability. So what I do is, because I already posted, or already uploaded or deployed the dashboards to the this particular dashboard to my dashboard link, all I do is I use that link here, and then I go into my dashboard site settings, into my SharePoint site settings under my navigation. And under my navigation, I can now, under my dashboards, add a new link. And I can call this my, Ticket to dashboard. Not very inventive, but it brings the point across. And I just simply paste that URL in here. Now, the reason why that is important is because you may want to specify the audience that has access to that link. So you literally have the ability now to determine, hey, who should have access to that? Which of these global audience should have access to that? Well, and based on that access right that a user will have, in my instance, I'm just going to leave it as it is. Depending on the access right that a particular user has, will actually mean, can I see that link or can't I? And that's how simple you can actually use the security as such. So, not bad with time. To summarize, what have we seen so far? Well, we saw that Project Server 2010 gives us a great data source. The data source itself is not the key here, it's maintaining the data on a high quality. We also need to make sure that we understand our data source. Depending on the type of report that we want to use, we want to make sure that we also use the right tool. And then, of course, very important, and it's funny, I don't know why, when we create dashboards, and often we need to deal with IT, they never give us actually exposure to the executives that need to see the dashboard. It's always involve the end user because they know best what they want to see. Well, and that at the end of the day allows us to create a great reporting and dashboarding capability. Any questions? You need to give me at least one or thank you.
Is the BI functionality something you can turn on and off? So I think I've seen implementations without that BI link at all.
Yes, you can, of course. By default, it installs it. It also probably depends on the version of Project Server that you use. If you have Project Server 2010, that should be OK. By the way, we have some gifts to give away. I thought I mentioned that. That's a very good question. Now, first of all, yeah, they're all installed for you. You can determine what kind of dimensions you would like to add. So when you set up Project Server, you have lots of custom fields that are organizational specific. You can automatically just add them to the OLAP cubes. And you can then also determine who should have the right for these cubes. Yeah. Yeah, it is. I know that because I have originally BI background. I know how hard it is to actually create these cubes and these BI capabilities. This just does it. It's just wonderful.
These cubes, how are they being populated real time?
Yep. So the question is, are these cubes populated real time or not? Well, no, they are not real time cubes. However, you can schedule these cubes. On a general basis, I would probably say on a daily basis, because the data that you analyze in cubes don't necessarily need to be real time. If you need to have a specific set of information real time, resource utilization, or what am I going to do in the next 3 hours? Well, then you may want to use the relational data for that. Yes, please.
Are the dashboards drillable through the dimensions?
Absolutely, yes. Depending on what kind of tool you actually choose. Now, for example, the performance point, the dashboard of the performance point, I'm just going to open up here. You can most certainly drill through all of the different dimensions that that cube makes available. Yep, very good question.
For security part, will you show us how just you are hiding a dashboard link or just make it visible? What happens if someone clicks to this link or gets the link from email or something? Especially that we have a very sensitive report.
Yeah.
And we want to be sure there is no one can access it.
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So the question was, well, what I've shown you here with the security, well, it could be perceived to be a workaround, really. It's not. The reason why that is because you actually address the security at the source. So you will, when you set up Project Server, for example, you will set up report viewer and report editor groups. And whoever has access right to these groups will then also have access rights to the source. So even if you would be able to link to that particular link, if you do not have rights from a user perspective, you would get access denied. Yep.
You talk about the cubes itself, or
yep. The content of the cubes. So in Project Server, I can determine who is allowed to see these cube data or not. So I can say, you're allowed to see the cubes or you're not. Or I can even say, you're allowed to see the departmental cube, so only for your department and not for the other departments. And that in Project Server, security takes actually care of that. Mm-hmm. Yes, please.
I think on the same note, you have to be sure that when the reports are created, that they're not, well, they're authenticating as whether they're using Kerberos or whatever. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and very good point. More technical, of course, you need to make sure that you understand what kind of authentication method you have, whether it's Kerberos and NTLM. Now, the actual authentication method doesn't really matter because you either do it Kerberos or NTLM. You just have to, when you set it up, you need to know whether it's Kerberos or NTLM.
So off the back of that question, are you saying when you configure security, it's going to create analysis services roles for you?
Say that again? No, it doesn't. Well, no, it does. Yes, it does. Absolutely. Yes, it does. Yes, absolutely. Mm.
Just was wondering where the best place we could probably look to for some samples that we could steal.
Great question. Very good. You can leverage the information. So first of all, what I've shown you here is, by the way, the demo image. Demo Project Server image. You can download that off the Microsoft page. That's probably the best way. There are, over the last 6 months, there are 2 white papers that you will find on the Microsoft page. One is for Performance Point, and one is for General BI that are outstandingly good, and they literally give you a step-by-step walkthrough, just like I have done that here. If you go onto the TechNet and just look for the white papers, you'll find it. I should have actually put that link on there. Yeah. It's on the hands-on lab. Thanks. That's the second MVP, by the way. That's Alex. He's going to present on Workflow tomorrow. Very good. You do want to see that. Yes, please.
That all looks easy. How do you get the project team members to actually put their timesheets?
That is an... So I've got a solution starter that if you don't put in your timesheet, you actually get an electric shock. And that's why I stress that point. This looks great, and I love selling the stuff because, well, it looks easy. It's the content and the governance. However, how can you govern if you don't have a helicopter view? Here, I can literally say, hey, which of my guys have actually submitted their timesheet? Why? Well, because the OLAP cube tells me which of the timesheet is rejected, in progress, submitted, and all of these things. It's the governance, and that's why you need that helicopter view. That's why these dashboards are so important, because from there you can say, hey, this department, there are 10 timesheets that haven't been submitted. And then what you do is you actually create a reporting services report that shows you the timesheet manager and the user and the date. And then you can actually say, dear timesheet manager, make sure that your timesheets, that your resources fill in the timesheet. You can, of course, use the stick. That is another very good way. And the carrot. Yeah. That is an outstandingly good one, actually. Yeah, I'm going to remember that, Alex. Excellent. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, I have a question for you. In order for you to win this wonderful trip for 2 to Hawaii, that wasn't it. No. In order for you to, this is the SharePoint one.
SharePoint conference.
Yes, thanks.
Ticket to the SharePoint conference.
And no EPM partner or MVP is allowed to answer that question. By default, how many cubes does Project Server?
Yeah.
Outstandingly good. You won that prize. Well, look, thank you very much. Unless you have any other questions, I'm going to be here for another couple of minutes. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.